listening, loving, curious,
I only like
history, business, biology, garlic, peppery, show story. Garlic pepper is a spice.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garland Pepper Presents podcast. Today, my guest is Wende. I want to say the full thing because it's been in my head.
Go for it.
Wende Bennette. Wende Bennette is a wine ambassador for Willamette Valley Vineyards. She's part of our Women in Business series. And I think we're in for a fascinating journey through what is wine, and particularly what is wine in Oregon. And Wende is a master of that. So we're going to listen to her story. Welcome, Wende.
Nice to have you. Me, you. Nice to be had. Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome. So let me just start out with you. Let's just start out with you and tell me a bit about yourself, like who you are.
Oh, wow. That's complicated.
No,
It's been a long life already. Let's see. I am from a very big family.
Oh, good.
I have a very, very, very big family.
How big is very big?
I've got 8 brothers and sisters.
Well, that's good size.
Yeah. Same mom and dad. They liked each other a lot, Gary. They had a kid like every year. We're very close in age.
We're all 1 year apart.
We're all like a year apart.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, there's 10 years between the oldest and the youngest. So we're very close in age. I grew up right in Salem, Oregon, which is right up the road from where I work at Willamette Valley Vineyards. This is my hometown. My family's walked on wagon train in the big Great Migration of the 1850s.
So your family are original Oregonians.
We're original Oregon Trail. They didn't die of dysentery on their journey.
They made it.
They made it, and their location that they wanted to go was Salem, Oregon. So the Pioneer Cemetery just up the road from my own home is where my great grandparents are buried, and they were the ones that walked the trail with their 8 children. Yeah.
You meet
and got here.
Oregonians whose families came here on the trail. Something about it, they just stay.
Well, they were searching for paradise, really. I mean, they were willing to risk their lives. They knew death was on the line. That my family, they lost their 4-year-old just 2 weeks into their journey walking across the plains. So, I mean, it was perilous, but they were looking for a better life for their families, and they knew they'd make history.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty remarkable story, and it was all journaled. So we've got a really great website that tells the stories, and I've been able to know those stories from when I was a child. So I think there's a lot of pride. There will be times when I'm driving down the freeway at 65 miles an hour, and I think to myself, wow, my family walked here. And I can get someplace so fast, and to imagine just the struggles that they went through and the planning that they had to do and the heartache.
Right.
And sometimes reading those stories can be really difficult for me, just to think about what people went through that. Like I would never imagine doing that. I couldn't imagine doing that. But then again, I'm not in the same place they are, and who knows? Life was very different.
All 8 of you.
Yeah.
You lived.
Yeah, well, there's 9 kids and my parents. So, I mean, I guess if we all went along, we'd be together. You know what I mean? There might be some solidarity in that.
Right.
And I'm sure that a lot of the folks that came across, they didn't come alone. They came with other people. But that's kind of how my family got here. And my family's lived in Salem the whole time, pretty much. I've got a lot of roots in McMinnville, too. So then I grew up LDS.
Oh, you did?
Mormon.
That's the 8 kids.
It's.
I know you are an ambassador for wine now.
Yeah. How did that work, right?
I don't know.
Well, I'm not LDS anymore. No issues or problems with that. Just didn't work for my family. Didn't
Right.
That wasn't the right fit for us. So
Well, I
my
understand the
yeah.
LDS very well. I grew up the same.
Oh, right. So as a woman, that really didn't work for us. My
Yeah,
mom my
you're a,
mom really didn't like that for her daughters. It just didn't.
oh, she didn't.
No, she didn't want her daughters to grow up subservient. So
Hmm.
I think my mother got into it, and there's a whole roundabout way that she ended up in it, and then my dad got into it because my mom was into it. And then as we all got older, she started to really see that there wasn't really a place for women to have any type of power or control.
Right.
And
Right. Everything's delegated to the man. I mean, you can have an opinion, but
yes,
in the end, it's his
it's his
whatever he.
choice. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So she didn't like that. She stayed in it, I think, because it was kind of something they did, and they made friends, and it was just like life. And then eventually, as me and my sisters started getting into our later teens and early 20s, my mom was like, "This just doesn't fit who we are," and so we left the church. But it wasn't. We still had friends. It was hard, but it was a long time ago. But that's how I grew up, and then I ended up getting in the wine industry because I loved service. I had always served. I had either been a waitress or I'd worked at country clubs, and
Yeah.
I love serving people, making them happy, finding out what it is that they need and find a way to fulfill it. So, my journey started small, working at restaurants and country clubs. And I went to school to be a marriage counselor.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, I wanted to help people to stay together too. I love love. I love love
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
And as I was taking classes, I realized pretty quick. No, I don't know about it was quickly into it, but I realized that it's not all what it's cracked up to be. Maybe the end result as a marriage counselor, when people make it, yay! But the hurt and the pain that people cause for each other, I didn't think I had the heart to be able to be involved in that. Like I have a really good memory, and I didn't want to taint my own dreams and ideas of love. So I decided that wasn't for me, and I took a step back. And as a kid from, with 8 brothers and sisters, we weren't, my father was a National Guardsman, so we didn't have like money, magic college money to do whatever we wanted with.
Sure.
So I took a hiatus. I was just going to Chemeketa Community College. I had been taking all my prerequisites and going toward that journey, and thought, I'm gonna take a hold. I'm gonna find out what I really want to do, like, because I don't want to just be plugging along and really not have a direction of where to go. So I took a year off of school, and I just was working to pay school loans off and live and have an apartment and have pay for groceries and all the things.
Hmm.
And I was a local waitress, and I waited on Mr. Jim Barneu.
Jim Barneu.
Jim Barneu, founder and president of Willamette Valley Vineyards. I did not know who he was. Like, he looked familiar to me, but I didn't know. And I knew his name was Jim because he paid with a credit card, and he had come in kind of regularly. He always seemed like he was in not a hurry, but like that he was a busy person. So I didn't do a lot of chit chat, just always kind of check in, and I'd get him in and out of there. He always seemed like he had to go or do things.
Uh-huh.
And one day I had charged him out, and he was still sitting there, like kind of watching what I was doing. And I came back over like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Is there something else that you need? I see that you're still here." And he's like, "Oh, no. I was watching you take that food order over there." And I was like, "Oh," and it was a table of like 10 people.
Oh.
He goes, "I noticed that you didn't write anything down." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I just memorized what they want." He goes, you memorized what everybody wanted at that table?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do it all the time." And he's like, "Well, I want to stick around and see if you got it right." So I was like, okay. And he stuck around, and I got everything right, because this wasn't rocket science to me. You know, it wasn't hard work to me. It was just like, I'm just serving them. I see what you want. I got it. You know, I didn't really need to, I don't know. I guess I just didn't even think about it, that it was hard or not hard. I just was what I did.
Oh, I'd have to have a pen.
Right.
We'd go from there to the kitchen, and I'd be like,
what?
well, shoot, what a chair to one want.
Right. And I just had I don't know, I just had this uncanny ability. My short-term memory is really, really good, like really kind of crazy good. My long-term memory is pretty good, but my short-term memory is really good. So I can usually remember people's names and what they want. I'm pretty good at that. So when it was all done, and, you know, I mean, he didn't stay the entire meal waiting for them to eat. He just stayed long enough to see if I could.
You set it down and it went smooth.
It all went fine. And so
I said, oh, this isn't mine.
Right. There was no issues. And I came back and I was like, well, there we go. And he goes, you know, that was really impressive. I didn't think it was impressive. I just thought, this is what I do every day. Like, this isn't that big of a deal. And he gave me his business card, and he said, you know, you'd be really great up at the winery. And I said, the winery? And he goes, oh, Willamette Valley Vineyards. I'm like, I love that place. Do you work there? And he's like, you could say that. And I didn't look at his business card, because I used to think that it was like impertinent. Like, ooh, this is what you do. You know, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I was young and just not thinking really. And so I tucked it into my apron. I went about my business. He left. And then when I was, you know, back in the back doing my closing duties and cleaning out my apron and turning everything in, I find his card, and it says founder and president. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was oh gosh, oh geez. So then I didn't call him, because he told me I should call him and, like, you know, come in and have an interview. You'd be great out there. And I was like, okay. Like, I don't know anything about wine. He's just, I hate to even say this, Gary, but I thought maybe he was hitting on me. You know, I know that's not the case, but like, I just didn't see what he saw.
Right.
And it's just because I just didn't, sometimes we don't see ourselves.
Well, you didn't understand the desperation of people in the service industry for magical people.
Not at all. And you're absolutely right.
How powerful and how challenging it is to actually get people who are worth a damn in that business. And when you see them, if you can grab them, you do.
I think you're right about that, because I've had my own cases where I've had really great service somewhere, and I've just thought to myself, like, I have got to have her work with me, or I have got to have him at the winery. He would be so great. So I think I know what you mean, but it's hard to see in your own self.
Well, you were a kid. You were just doing your best.
I was, right.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And so so I didn't call. I didn't email. I just thought he must be crazy. And he came out to dinner with his daughter, Emmy, who's, you know, she's in her 30s now. And I waited on them. And again, he says, why haven't you called? Why haven't, you know, you emailed? And I was like, oh, you know, you don't want me. I don't know anything about wine. And he goes, you know what? I can teach you all that. But whatever this thing is that you are, I can't teach that.
That's right.
So I thought about it for a little while, and I still didn't go though, Gary. I still just was thinking about it. Like, I don't know. And then he sent in his management team, and he gave a headhunter's fee to his management team. Who can bring her in? And so I was waiting on them. And, you know, I just started noticing how strange is this that all these people from Willamette are now coming down to lunch here, you know.
Where were you working?
I was working, of all places, the Applebee's. And I chose the Applebee's because it was non-smoking. It was a safe family environment. Mm-hmm. I could turn tables really quickly, and I could just get out of there, and I wouldn't have to think about it. I could just get out of there. I worked there for 6 years.
Oh my God.
And I got to tell you what, I had such a fun time. I made so many great friends and incredible lifelong customer friendships that I still keep in touch with people to this day that I adore from that time there. You know, and it's wild to me to think of myself in that role, because I had always worked at mom and pop places. you know, high-end restaurants. But then I moved to Los Angeles for a little while. I thought I'd try to become an actress for a small period of time in my early 20s. And then I came back and I had taken a string of jobs working at like bars, like clubs, when downtown Salem used to be hopping, you know, when they used to have like, you know, lines out the door in some of those bars downtown before OLCC got smart and shut that down because it was a really bad, dangerous scene for a long time. But I did that and I just was like, this is so gross. I smelled so bad. My hair, my clothes, I'd have to just take everything off and shower before I went to bed. It was so gross, cigarette smoke. And I just hated it. And then the Applebee's had been built. It had just been opened up. I had a friend that worked there that was like, hey, they're looking for a bartender. It's full time. And I'm like, you know what? I got to get out of this job, this stuff. This isn't going anywhere. And although Applebee's wasn't going anywhere either, it was a safer, cleaner environment. So I jumped on board, stayed with them for a while. And then, so all this crew started coming in from Willamette asking, you know, oh, would I be interested in working up there? Da, da, da. And this one gal, she says, why don't you just come up for an interview? Because, you know, maybe your boss will find out here and he'll give you a raise so he doesn't lose you. She's like, you got nothing to lose. And I was like, you know, she's right. I don't have anything to lose. Why not? So I went up there and they had like a panel of 6 managers interviewing me, which I thought was really strange. I was like, okay, but I nailed the questions because they were really easy for me. It was really all about service. And that's one thing I love to do. I love serving customers. So there was no problem. But the other thing was that I just was really surprised about was that all of them just seemed really interested in me. So when they were all done with the interview, I said, you know, can I ask a question? I'm just so curious here. Like, do you normally interview someone for the tasting room with a panel like this? And they were like, oh, we don't want you for the tasting room. And I was like, oh, well, do you mind telling me what I'm interviewing you for? And they were like, well, we need somebody to redesign our tour and tasting program. And I was like, well, I've never been on a wine tour. I've never given a tour. I was like, can I take one and see if this would be even something I would want to do? And they were like, yeah. So I took a wine tour, and no offense to the gal, but she was awful. It was awful. I was like, I mean, she's a nice lady. I know her even to this day. She's super sweet, but it was just not like there was
presentation skills.
Yeah, there just wasn't anything tangible to take away. You know, it was too simple. It was not, I felt like if I was going to go on a wine tour, I'd maybe want to know more things, like not everything, not to where I glaze over and not have an idea what somebody was talking about, but just something more. I wanted some stories and some substance.
Yeah.
And there just really wasn't anything there. So I took the job because I really felt like I could do something. I felt like that I could have some fun with it. And so I kept my other job. I did this one on the weekends, and then it just went so well that Jim is like, I need her full time, you guys. I need her. I want her all the time. Like, can you find some other things for her to do? So they asked me to come on and run their off-site event program. So Newport Seafood and Wine Festival, the Bite of Oregon, you know, all these big festivals.
Yeah.
So I was running these booths with, you know, I'd have cases of wine behind me. I'd have, you know, employees and volunteers that I'm managing. So essentially I'm kind of managing this weekend party.
Right. So yeah, your little pop-up business manager.
Pop-up business venture, right? And so I started doing that, and it was really hard work. I did that for about 3 years, but you know, it was hugely beneficial in that when I'd first get to the event, I would set up, and then when my employees came or my volunteers, I'd have them take over the table, and then I'd say, I'm going to be right back. And I got a clipboard, and I went around to all of the booths, to the other wineries, because I was new at this. I didn't know anybody. I felt like I don't want to say like a big dummy, but like I just felt really not connected. I love being connected. and I just didn't know anybody. So I walked around and it was early, so they weren't busy. The other booths weren't busy. It was the beginning of the festival. And this was up at the Bite of Oregon, was my very first big event. And I wrote down, and it's a big event right at the waterfront. And I wrote down people's names and information and like, what's your favorite wine here? And where are you located? And what's the story? And I learned about 10 different wineries. Some of them were like, we're really busy. Oh, you're with Willamette. Oh, it was very strange. Only a couple of them were like that. But the ones that were like, oh, hey, yeah, oh, this is where I'm at and this is what I make. Well, all weekend long, I sent people over to them because people would be like, oh, who else should I see here? And I'd be like, oh, go see Will over at Meth then, go, on and on of who they should see. So then what ended up happening is this camaraderie started to form. And instead of us being rivals, we were friends and supporting each other. So they would send people to me and I'd send people to them. Then the next festival would happen and lo and behold, there's my friends again, the friends I just met before. And so we start becoming friends and then they introduce me to their people. Oh, you've got to go meet so-and-so at this booth. And then in that 3 years, really solidified some major basis for me for places, other wineries in Oregon that not only that I could go visit and learn more about my own self, but that I could send people to. And so that gave me more credibility.
Right.
Because then I actually I was in it. I was doing it.
Right.
So then after the offsite events, because then Jim Barneu was like, okay, that's great, but I want her more here. Like, I don't want her there. I like that she's there. That's great. She's doing a great job, but I want her here. I've got clients that are coming in, people that are coming in. She shines bright and I want her here. So then I came back and I became a full-time winery ambassador. So what an ambassador would do is they'd manage family accounts, personal direct-to-consumer accounts, not company accounts, not wine shops, restaurants, grocery stores. This is like people, real people. And that's my favorite stuff. So I get to serve people.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while. I still do that. That's actually my main job that I do. But then not long into it, they wanted to send me out on the road because I started making friendships with all these people who'd come here and then they live in different places. And those people, oh, you've got to come here, Wendy. We've got this really cool festival. You've got to come to this festival. Well, all my history of working our offsite events, they were like, well, Wendy can work an event. She knows how to run a booth. And it's because all the bartending I'd done, being able to manage, multiple people, getting them kind of together, so to speak.
Sure.
And so then I started doing that. I started going out on the road and I was traveling all over to almost every state in the US and just popping in and doing events or meeting with wine shops, grocery stores, getting what they call placements, getting my wine in a wine shop. And so also
selling all across the United States.
Selling all across the United States.
Wow.
And at first I loved it. All my friends were like, oh my God, when you got the coolest job, it's crazy. I can't believe your job. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe this job. Did this really happen? Like, I was supposed to go back to college to like figure out what I was supposed to do. And here I'm like a complete duck to water, like just picking it up like it was completely meant to be. Like I was always meant to be here.
Right.
And then going out on the road was fun, but it was so hard. It was tiring and it was not fun. I mean, it was fun when I get to be with people.
Yeah.
There'd be times I wouldn't even remember what town I was in. Like I'd wake up in a hotel and be like, I'd have to go and look at the phone, or I'd have to like find, oh, that's right, I'm in Baltimore right now. Okay. I'm heading down to Annapolis. You know what I mean? Like just crazy stuff. And then I really didn't have like a home. That sounds crazy, but like, I rented a room from one of my girlfriends and just basically stored everything because I was on the road so much.
Yeah.
And I just
the best roommate ever.
Yeah, right. They never even home. but
Yeah.
I really missed home. Like I missed, I didn't just miss like, my family. I missed my family, of course, but I didn't have a husband. I didn't have children. So it wasn't like that. I just missed Oregon.
Yeah.
Like I just missed the smell and the season and I don't even know how to explain it right. When you're an Oregonian and you leave and you come back, you know what I'm talking about. It's this
Yeah.
really
Even the
strange.
people are different here.
Yeah.
So there's a different kind of openness.
Yeah.
I hope we don't lose
Yeah.
COVID because even myself, I feel a little more closed in and I feel awkward. Like, if I see a movie where like people are getting close to each other, I'm like, ah,
Isn't that funny? You never even thought about it before. And now COVID, you'll watch a movie that came out before and you're like, oh, I can't believe they're not wearing a mask. But anyway, but I came back home in 2016, kind of more full time back home. And now I only travel for special programs that I develop, which is wonderful. So I like if I have friends out in the market is what I call it, out in the world that want me to come out, and I want to go see them too. I'll just design a program so that I can go and see them, and so that I can, I guess, essentially kind of pay for my trip by going out and getting placements and stuff like that. So continue the work that the winery has put up for me to do.
so you built up quite a few markets. How many years did you do that?
I did that from 2012 to 2016 solidly. And then I came back in September of 2016. And then I have since then only done a few trips a year. So, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Because now I'm a married person. I have a sweetheart. He is wonderful. I've got two incredible stepkids that I like to be able to be here for.
Yeah.
So it's nice. This whole COVID thing's been interesting because I haven't been able to travel. And even though I wasn't traveling full time, I was still traveling at least, four to five times a year for about a week and a half to 2 weeks at a time. And now I haven't been able to do anything. But I've been doing virtual calls like crazy. Zoom's become like my new best friend, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm connecting with people all across the country. I did some big programs for the American Wine Society right when COVID dog days hit, when it got really bad. I just reached out to the American Wine Society. I'm like, let's just do a series of virtual tastings. And that went really well.
So how did you format that? That's some pretty creative thinking.
Yeah, I was doing some dreaming. I was doing a lot of dreaming. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but in the morning, right before I wake up, I feel pretty lucid and can have, I just sometimes have some of my greatest ideas first thing in the morning. So I just started trying to think outside of the box and adapt to whatever was happening. Because this was in March, end of March, when I came up with the idea. And I know that there are organizations all across the country that want and need to get together, right? So I'm like, okay, well, the American Wine Society, they drink wine, they like to get together, and they're going to have a challenge with it. So maybe I'll try this out. So I called the president of the American Wine Society, and I just said, hey, I've got an idea. Do you have 5 minutes? And he said, yeah, what's going on? And I told him my idea, and he's like, I love it. I'm going to put you in our next newsletter. And he goes, actually, let me send an email out to all the presidents of our chapters and see if they're interested. And before you knew it, it took off. It took off crazy. And I was grateful for it because I wasn't sure if my regular market base, like the people that I work with direct to consumer on a regular basis, I didn't know how they were going to be affected by COVID. So I was trying to find outlets, and actually what I was surprised about, Gary, is there's one thing that is inevitably going to happen no matter how bad things get. People drink.
Oh yeah, I'm drinking more than I ever have.
People drink. They drink wine. I mean, not everybody drinks, but a lot of people do, and they like great wine. And so, if anything, things just really started ramping up direct to consumer because so many things shut down.
Well, apparently, they're selling a lot more alcohol in Utah than they used to.
Oh, Gary, what's funny? I have spent a lot of time in the Utah market, and one of my main reps there, she goes, you want to know what's the most profitable weekend of the entire year. In fact, we almost sell more alcohol in that one weekend than the whole rest of the year.
Oh, General Conference.
General Conference.
Well, you know, yeah.
It just makes me laugh a little bit, but
It's anytime family gets together,
yeah,
stress levels are higher.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
yeah.
people need a little something to take it down.
Take the edge off.
Yeah. But yeah.
So.
Well, I worked at Pepsi in Provo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, Pepsi, well, we had all the brands because it was a Pepsi factory, but we had Orange Crush and Hires Root Beer and 7-Up and Dr.
RC Cola?
And no RC because
no RC. Yeah.
But and Diet Pepsi. So you would think being Utah, it'd be Root Beer, 7-Up, and Orange Crush that sold. Not even close. All the Mormons are drinking the Pepsi.
It's so funny. It's so funny. It makes me laugh only because it's such a silly thing. It's such a silly thing, you know, don't drink dark liquids. It's such a silly thing. But, you know, I think what they really meant in that particular scripture, and forgive me, was probably whiskey. Probably don't drink whiskey, but
it probably was.
But it is what it is.
It included tea and coffee and all that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's funny, Gary. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up a little Mormon, a little bit. But yeah, that was one of my first jobs out of high school was working at a bottling factory. It was hard work.
Yes. Yeah. Production is very difficult. It's a lot of moving parts and, you know, commonly you're in a warehouse type facility, so it's not very warm or comfortable. Loud, very loud. Mm-hmm.
And machines move at their pace, and it's not a human pace. So the rhythms are being dictated by the system, and it's really difficult.
Yeah.
So I've never worked in a factory since then. I did about a year there.
We call that purgatory.
Yeah.
Because commonly when you work in production, it's like the same thing. So,
over and over.
Yeah.
So you build up these markets, and then he wants you to kind of build up the whole brand as an ambassador.
Yeah.
It becomes your next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it wasn't just me. There are several of me. I mean, there's only one Wendy,
right?
You know, but there were other people. This was what they wanted to do, like a hybrid type program. Mm-hmm. So somebody who knows how to serve and work with people. They wanted to try to do the same thing, working with restaurants, grocery store, wine shops.
Okay.
But there's a big learning curve there that, you know, so when I first went out into the market, I didn't know anything about depletions. What does that even mean? You know, or what OND meant.
I don't know what either of those mean.
So depletion is when so as a supplier, we provide a product, right, to the distributor. And when the distributor sells it, they're depleting it. It's a depletion.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so you get a depletion report, and that's supposed to let you know how much product this particular market is going through. But I didn't know how to pull a depletion report. I didn't even know what one was.
Right. You don't know where it's going.
I didn't even know where to find it, or what OND meant, which is October, November, December. OND. But in the wine industry, OND is like everybody uses that term, and basically what it means is you're going to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
You're about to experience the busiest season of your lifetime. That's OND. And so commonly they either don't let you travel and market during that time, or you need to be finding out what they need for OND. So there are like certain things I just really didn't know anything about. And I went in blindly.
So it's hands on deck when the grapes come in. Nobody's doing outside projects. It's all harvest and bottle and casking and bottling and all of that stuff.
You mean at the winery?
Yes.
Yeah, that's still happening there. But for me, you know, and I can talk about that all day long. I can talk about the winery. I can talk about making wine. I can talk about anyone at the winery, which is good. And actually, I think it was better, because then when I went out into the market, I wasn't like every Tom, Dick, and Harry sales rep that was out there trying to sell their snake juice. You know, here I am like a real person. Not that they aren't real, but what I mean by that is I'm actually from this place. Mm-hmm. I'm not somebody who lives on the East Coast and serves that territory. Like, I'm literally from the winery. So you could tell how green I was. Right. And I just, you know, I would just be asking questions. I would just be soaking in everything that I could, because I just felt like I was floundering. Yeah. But I've always been a firm believer that if I'm failing, I'm getting closer to winning. Like I will actually solve my problem the more I fail. Yeah. You know, so there were plenty of times I cried myself to sleep in my hotel room, but I was being effective. It was working. Whatever I was doing was working. I just didn't know what I was doing. Right. So when I
you come out despite your knowledge deficit, your skills,
because whoever this person's skills are, right?
Find stories. And that's one of the things you talked about is finding the stories and putting story into the experience. And that's an important insight.
Well, and you got to know when to do it. Yeah. You can't look like you've been thinking about what you wanted to say the whole time somebody's talking. Yeah. You know, listening is a big deal in this industry. Just taking that moment to just listen to somebody, even if it might not have anything to do with what you're doing. Yeah. But people just want to be heard, and a lot of the time I want to listen to what they want to say. It's going to help me to know what to do for them. And that's what I did when I was out in the market. I wasn't trying to sell wine. I was just servicing them. The buyer already knows what they want. They know how much they are going to pay, because they're a buyer. That's their design. Yeah. They know what they're missing in their store. So I never really had to do a lot of selling. I would just ask some questions to help get some feedback. And then I would just thank them for their time. And 9 times out of 10, I would get a sale, because I just it wasn't that I wasn't asking for it. It's just, I wasn't expecting it.
Right. When you came along, when the Pinots, which is really that's the Northwest wine.
That's right.
Right. It's the one wine that we make that our volcanic soil just turns into just the most delicious stuff.
Isn't it the best? Mm-hmm. We are lucky. It sure beats the hell out of hazelnuts and logging, Gary.
Yeah, it's a much better way to kind of utilize our resources, isn't it? I mean,
we're really lucky that we have so many incredible natural resources here. And I'm not dogging on logging. I love it. I'm just messing around. It's we're really lucky to have that here too.
Yeah, we are. And that's actually what, your family came up on. Imagine. I mean, if they weren't directly involved with logging, literally all the money running through Salem had logging on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Buildup of Oregon. Oregon.
Oregon.
Just to make you feel like maybe you're in Kentucky or something.
We haven't gone anywhere. I always tell people we're still there.
Oregon. Yeah. Which is weird, because it does sound like Oregon is the same thing as the organ, or pipe organ or
totally
body organ. It's the way we pronounce it. It's not spelled the same as them, but it's our way, and doggone it, that's the way it's said, because it's our state.
Because it's our state. That's right.
Our state, yeah. So you go around the country and you're meeting amazing people, but at some point we decide that we want to introduce Oregon wines to the world. Are you part of that?
So, Oregon wines, luckily, I mean, I wished I had been part of that. That's pretty much happened. Oregon, actually, the top 100 wineries in the world were introduced by Wine Spectator, and 6 of them were from Oregon. What? And that was, I believe that particular article came out like 5 years ago. But Oregon is being recognized as one of the greatest wine producers in the world. Yeah. And for good reason. I mean, you think about what is what's up with Oregon? Why is it so much different than our neighbors, let's say in California? And this isn't going to be a California bashing party because there's lots of wonderful wines from
Amazing
California.
wine in California.
It's not about that, but what it is about standards. Now, in Oregon, our standards are really, really high. We have super, super high regulated standards in Oregon. In California, they don't. They have substandard, is my personal opinion.
Okay.
I think that I believe that they should be raising their standards. They have for instance, they have what's called the 75-25 law, which means that if you call a wine Cabernet Sauvignon in California, then 75% of it has to be Cabernet.
Oh.
Now let's imagine if they did that with Pinot. So they grow Pinot in California, and let's say that 75% Pinot Noir. Well, I can tell you there are plenty of Pinot Noirs that are produced where I've had people in other states taste the wine, and it's from California, it's a Pinot, and they're like, wow, this tastes like a Syrah. Well, maybe it has Syrah in it.
It could.
It could. And so the other part is too, that not only do they have that 75-25 law, but they are allowed to use certain vinifera that we aren't even legally allowed to grow here. One of them is called Ruby Red. And Ruby Red is one of the very few grapes in the world that has a red inside and red outside.
Okay.
And it doesn't taste all that great. It's just, what they grow it in California in abundance, and then they pick it, and then they turn it into a food dye.
Okay.
And it dyes the color of the juice darker in red, and it also has a lot of tannin structure, so it gives a lot of mouthfeel. So they use it as a filler to color wine or to give texture to wine.
Yeah.
And it's called Mega Purple is the name of that, Mega Purple. We are not allowed to grow that here because we don't want to bastardize our wine. And I'm not trying to say that that's why California grows it, because they know they're bastardizing their wine. But any great winemaker knows that you don't need that. Why would you need any of that? So here in Oregon, we have the 90-10 law. 90% of what's on the bottle has to be what's in the bottle, and 10% can be something else. We don't usually need that problem, but sometimes people like to blend in, let's say like Pinot Gris, our Pinot Gris, we blend in a little bit of Pinot Blanc to give more mid-palate. But it isn't because we don't want to be true to Pinot Gris, it's just we're trying to give a little bit more of an authentic mouthfeel. So we have just tiny little ways we can mess around. But for instance, in the Willamette Valley, 95% of the fruit has to be what, like, let's say from a particular AVA, like Eola Amity or Dundee or McMinnville. If that says it on the bottle, 95% of it has to be from that location.
Those vineyards in that location.
Right. And now what's that?
We have really strict laws regarding domain.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is really, it's truth in labeling. It's truth in labeling that Oregon has tried really hard to do from the very get-go. I mean, everything from us writing really strict label laws to protect us from ourselves, because our neighbors in California had upset the French so badly that the French wanted nothing to do with the American wine industry anymore. I mean, you think about jugged Burgundy that was not from Burgundy, you know, or Chablis, beautiful Chablis,
right.
Chardonnay in a plastic bag on a tap.
Right.
You know, or the dreaded white Zinfandel, which single-handedly plummeted the sales of rosé for decades. You know, so right? I mean, you would find people who wouldn't be caught dead having pink wine in their glass.
Yeah.
And now, where you used to rarely ever be able to find a bottle of rosé, now you can find entire sections of rosé. Thank goodness. I love rosé. I'm so glad rosé is back. But, you know, so Oregon was really strict on label laws. And really it was to protect us from ourselves, to protect the French and really other industries. But
so, you know, there's the whole concept of, you know, the libertarianism, whereas like, I just do the wine my way. And then there's that don't regulate me thing that's out there. And yet this industry, in order to unify a product with the brand of Oregon, decided to work on legislation to constrain itself.
Yeah.
Very unusual, using
Yeah.
the law.
Now, Gary, that happened a long time ago. I don't know that would have, I don't know if it would have happened now.
Oh, I
Like
doubt.
if they could have passed that now. This was done back in, the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s was really when this was happening.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant and wonderful that it happened, because in the end, the French ended up looking at Oregon as like real, like not just camaraderie, but like as a legitimate place to grow and make wine.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and I'm not trying to say they think like totally of us now. I'm sure they kind of think of us more as maybe hillbillies, but I think they're seeing that we're authentic.
Yeah.
And they love it. So we get a lot of visitors from France that come out here. The big International Pinot Noir celebration, the IPNC, that's hosted there at Linfield College.
Yeah.
They bring in producers from France, and then we partner up with them. Like we're pen pals. We're buddies. Each winery gets their own. Each winery that's involved in IPNC per each year gets their own French producer, and you become friends with them.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. We've got a really cool one named Bertrand Ambrose, and he's like the most lovely man ever, and he comes over to Oregon all the time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you ever get over there, France and all that?
I haven't been there yet. I really want to go. I've done Italy and loved it, went all over the place there. I just haven't had a chance to go to do the France thing yet. I was doing too much traveling of my own for work, but now that I have a little bit, I don't want to say free time because I certainly don't have that, but I'd like to be able to make a trip over there. And I do have some colleagues that have worked in the industry and worked in different wineries there that are like, oh, I've got to get you out there. Just tell me when you're going to go. So I feel confident that I'd be well taken care of. When I do, I just got to work on my French. I'm much better at Spanish and Italian, but I'll have to work on my French.
French is harder than the other two, and you would think you'd be able to kind of tie it all together because it's a Latin base, but
yeah,
the pronunciation is so different on everything.
It is. But the best thing you can do is learn as much of the language as you can when you're there, because the French will actually almost, I don't want to say embrace you, but they'll be much kinder to you if you can try to speak their language.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's on the bucket list. For sure.
Yeah, it definitely should be. So, and their wines, I think, are more comparable to Oregon wines than, say, Italian wines are so much drier, and same with Portuguese.
Absolutely. Very similar climates. Very similar climates.
Well, that was the reason that the guy who brought the first Pinots to Oregon, he researched up and down, and this was, the reason he went to, which valley did he go to? Dundee, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's two guys that are famous in Oregon. The two founding fathers of wine country here. The first one was Richard Summers, and he had gone to school at UC Davis, and he came up to Roseburg. Yeah. Little Roseburg, Oregon, which is actually where Jim Barneu, our founder, is from. That's his hometown. And Jim's dad, he was a local lawyer, and he wrote I don't think it was legislation. He wrote the very first, I guess, permit for the first licensed and bonded winery in Oregon, and that was at Hillcrest Winery in Little Roseburg. And initially, Richard Summers had told his professors and his friends, like, I want to grow, I want to grow the noble varietals, and I think it's going to happen in Oregon. And he loaded up and came up to Oregon, and he started getting really nervous because his friends basically said, you're not going to get anything to grow there. Like, moss grows on people there. Like, good luck.
It does.
And so he started to get nervous. And as he was driving up to the Willamette Valley, maybe not knowing that he was going to the Willamette Valley, just going north.
Right.
He stopped in Roseburg because he got nervous, and he thought, maybe my friends are right. Maybe if I go too far, I won't be able to ripen these grapes. So he settled there. And then not long afterward in 1964, so that was 1961. And in 64, just 3 years later, David Lett, who had gone to school, he's actually from Utah. I don't know if you know that or not. He'd gone to school in Salt Lake, and then he transferred. What's that?
You're studying medicine.
I believe so, yeah. And then he transferred over to UC Davis and started in on their viticulture program. And he was just like a total champion. He knew he was going all the way up north. There was no question about it. He was like, you know, the latitudes match, the climate match, the soil had a lot of similarities. This is going to be the holy grail of Pinot Noir. So I'm not sure that he said all that, but I mean, I know that he was willing to take the chance. Mm-hmm. So he came up here. Now the story is that David Lett was looking at a couple different pieces of property. The very first property that he really wanted, that he was like hoping for, that fell through, was in Silverton, Oregon.
Oh, where?
I'm not sure the location, exact location, but that was his original place, was out over in near Silverton. Huh? And then the second property that came up was the one in Dundee. So he started that property in Dundee, and then lo and behold, just not long, 10 years after he started, 1974, his South Block Pinot Noir placed at the World's Fair. And everybody's eyes were on it, like, what? Who? No. Somebody must have been getting paid. There's no way that these podunks in Oregon could win.
Which vineyard was that? Dundee or?
This was the one in Dundee, and this is for Irie Vineyards. That's David Lett's program over there, Irie Vineyards. Now, we lost David Lett in, I think it was 2008 or 2009. But his son, Jason, bright, wonderful, kind-hearted young man, has taken on taken the reins there and has kept Irie Vineyards going, and not just kept going, but thriving. They make a wonderful wine, beautiful spot. Their tasting room's just in downtown McMinnville, but their vineyards are out in Dundee. And then now, interestingly, David Lett was very good friends with Bill Fuller, who started Tualatin Estate, and Willamette Valley Vineyards merged companies with Tualatin Estate in the mid-90s. So Bill Fuller, who was the very first winemaker to come up here, everyone else had been students of wine, but never actually making wine. And Bill Fuller, who worked for Louis Martini, quit his job at Louis Martini because his friend David Lett said, "Get up here. Yeah. This place is incredible. Like, this is the place to be." So he loaded up his wife in her station wagon and the kids and packed it up. And then he got his pickup truck loaded up with cuttings and winemaking equipment, and he came up here. And him and David Lett did work together to start different Chardonnay programs and Pinot programs of their own. We still luckily have Bill Fuller to tell the story of some of these very first days when nothing was here. We didn't even have a roadmap of what Oregon wine would look like. We didn't even know what the soil types were. It's remarkable how far we've come in such a short amount of time. It's from 1961 to now. It's a young industry.
58 years. It's a long time. But, what does it take? 10 years for an orchard or a vineyard to really start producing?
Yeah, I mean, you really start to see your first fruit at 3 years, but it's meager. Right. But about 5-6 years in, you start seeing more of it. Usually when people start a winery, they're and plant a vineyard, a lot of the time they'll contract out for fruit while they're trying to grow their brand. So it's super, super common. A lot of the time, even now, you'll find wineries that are what are called nano wineries. So they're just, they're making wine like at the Carlton Winemaker Studio. They're so small that they might not even have a tasting room. I love that stuff. I think it's so exciting to watch some of these new brands come out and these winemakers giving it a whirl. I love it. And you never know where they're going to go. Who they'll end up working for or what their brand will end up being. It's just kind of like when we first started out here in Oregon, people looked at Oregon wine like we were crazy. And here we are now, you know, decades later, and really, you know, getting 90 points plus on all kinds of wines in Oregon. So it's yeah.
Where we just didn't get the sun, and it's just made for a few bad seasons. How does a winery work through that? That's got to be really challenging. It's kind of like COVID can happen almost any time to a winery. You're just going to get a bad year.
Well, luckily, Oregon, we really haven't had any, I don't want to call them bad years, because I don't think we really had any. We've had challenging years. Oregon does have a very unique growing season comparatively to a lot of places. For instance, the vine, not just any growing here in Oregon, and let's just talk about the actual vine, the grape, it grows from May to October. So from October to May, it's sleeping, it's dormant, it's not doing anything. It just looks like an ugly stick coming out of the ground. You know, it's scraggly. Then May happens and bud break happens. And from May to October is the life of that fruit. And if you think about it, most of the rain that happens here in Oregon and the cloudiness that we see happens from October to May. Mm-hmm. From May to October, Oregon only gets about 5 inches of rain. It's very small amount, and usually it'll happen in a spurt, right? And it'll be done. Now, the time when it's the most dangerous, that rain that we're talking about, is in May, which all that rain can really damage bud break. All the little pestils that are sticking out, wanting to grow, it'll get knocked off, and every time they get knocked off, that's like a cluster being knocked off, essentially. So it's bad then, and then it's bad at harvest. Because if it rains at harvest time, a little rain's fine. But if it rains like we oftentimes see it in October, the rain will get into the cluster and can rot the cluster from the inside out. Yeah. So we really want it cool and dry. So the cool's totally fine. Pinot likes it cool. In fact, it's much like a diva. If it gets too hot, it will just walk off stage. And there is nothing you can do to get it back if it gets too hot. Yeah. So that's actually going to be the next challenge for us, is this climate change. Climate change is going to be a really big challenge.
So the Umpqua Valley wine should be the precursor for you. You should be able to see what's happening there.
Oh, with the fires, you mean? Or with the heat change?
Yeah, because that's really the transition. Roseburg, the Umpqua Valley is the transition in Oregon between the southern Oregon climate and the northern Oregon climate.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. You are right on the money there. It might be a little difficult to compare the Pinot just because it's a touch warm. I'm wondering if maybe some of the Pinots from the early days of Umpqua Valley maybe taste more like what they do now. Mm. Yeah. But they're growing a lot of big reds down in Douglas County, Red Hills, Douglas County, in Umpqua, and in Southern Oregon in the Rogue. So we'll just adapt as we go, because what else are we going to do?
Well, that's the thing about horticulture, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got to stay in line with the systems, and the systems are dictated by, the seasons and the sun and the environment. Absolutely. And all that. And
absolutely, this year was a challenge. I'll tell you that much. With all these fires, it was really wild. But I think we're going to be okay. It just was, that timing wasn't very good. But we'll make it out of it.
Yeah, I think we're going to be good. I think a lot of people are going to be better, and a lot of people are going to be worse after all of this. Yeah. I feel like it's kind of both are going on with me. They're in some ways, not so good in others, but but I think we're all going to get better over time, and hopefully this space is giving people time to kind of go deeper. We've been kind of on this what's new, what's happening kind of reality for a long time. And maybe it's a good time for us to go deeper and look at what's best.
Yeah. I know that's definitely been especially since COVID,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't, I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. I know this sounds kind of crazy to say, but I have a lot of gratitude for COVID. That's crazy to say.
Right.
Who in the world would say that?
Right.
But what I mean by that is that yes, it's awful. It's taken lives. It's like upended people's, fortunes. It has just been crazy. But it's also given time for perspective.
Yeah.
What is important?
Yeah.
How is my time going to be spent? What if this is the end? What am I gonna? How am I gonna look back on my life and think to my, be able to look at myself and be proud of what I've created, or happy about myself as a human?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like COVID has, for me, given me an opportunity to just kind of, especially when it was first happening, like when it was, again, what I call dog days of COVID, like when it was just really unknown and really creepy and scary. And I was traveling at that time. I was in Pittsburgh on the 17th of March on my way back home, and terrified that I was going to come home and not be able to breathe, you know what I mean? And die. But, past that, getting well, being fine and all of that, just thinking to myself, like, I really want to be able to make, more of a impact on my people, like that, and make sure that they know I care.
Uh-huh.
Because life's short.
It is short.
Yeah.
And we need to come out of it as best we can, I guess. And hopefully we've left behind a good wake of service. I'm just really glad that we touched on that. It's been a reoccurring theme that has come up over and over through these podcasts, and that is that service is the highest order that we can actually aspire to. And the challenge that I think a lot of us have is when we give service, to be taken as a servant. And the difference between the two is based upon respect, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that's challenging for people who give service or are serve is being taken for granted and assumed that they will always serve, and then not treated as respectfully. Have you found that ever, or do you demand respect me?
Well, I think for me, I've been fortunate in all the years that I've done it to recognize when I'm being taken for granted, like to see that it's happening.
Yeah.
And, and also to not put myself there.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes one time to recognize. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes it takes a little bit of courage to say, I don't want, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Because there's always, for me at least, this feeling I'm letting somebody down. I don't want to let somebody down, right? Mm-hmm. But I have had occasions where, people have pushed too much or demanded too much or, whatever. And I've put myself out there and, found myself serving, being the servant, and recognizing that it didn't do anything for the company and it didn't do anything for me. So finding ways to be able to say no. And saying no is a hard thing for me. I'm a yes person. I love saying yes. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of power in saying no. And also recognizing that it's okay. It's okay to say no. Yeah. And maybe no isn't necessarily the right word, but being able to say that doesn't work for me.
Right. And knowing your boundaries. I mean, you just really have to kind of explore that. Like sometimes when you're serving and all of a sudden you notice it. You're like, oh, this person expects me.
Yeah.
They feel like they could do that and I would do this. And how do you step out of that, especially if they have authority or something like that? And it's
Oh man, I have actually had that happen more times than I can count in my lifetime. Um, and each, I guess each time I've played it as I could, the best that I could. And maybe beat myself up later.
Sure.
But maybe also just thought like, I'm going to find the good in that. So I've had occasions where people will lie to me about who they are.
Yeah.
That happens so often. Somebody will lie to me about who they are so that they'll get special treatment.
Sure.
They'll get, things, they'll be looked at as a VIP because they've made up who they are. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember one particular incident. This young man was he's a blogger. He was a wine writer. He was a food writer. He had a huge following, and just wanted to really make sure that I knew that all the stuff about him. So I created a special, situation where, we were going to take care of him. And then I decided, I'm going to look this guy up.
Yeah.
Because if he's a big deal, I want to know what he's done.
Sure.
He was not a big deal.
No.
He was not anything really.
Right.
But when he came, I still showed him a really good time. I didn't give him as much as I would have.
Right.
Looking, if he had really been the person he said he was,
sure,
he would have gotten a lot more, and he wouldn't have ever really had to say anything. He could have just said who he was, and why don't you go ahead and see the work I've done? You know what I mean? Like that I could have looked him up and seen he was, that the person was a big deal. But I still showed him a good time, and the reason why is I felt like, this person has a loud mouth. And what I mean by that is he's willing to say all kinds of things to get what he wants.
Right.
So I've got to be careful with this one. I can't give him everything because I can't. I just can't. But I need to give him something because he's going to leave, and he's, no matter what, he's either going to say something really bad if he doesn't think he got what he wanted, or he's going to say something so wonderful on and on and on. It's going to be one extreme or the other. Right. And so we showed him a good time, and he did. He on and on, loved it, and still, even to this day, loves it. He's not that big of a deal. He thinks he's a really big deal. He's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I recognize that I'm like those little plants that they just brought up, like you were talking about way back in the day. And I've been watering them things, and then they're going to grow eventually, but I've got a few seasons ahead of me.
I hope so.
Fine.
I hope so, Gary. You're going to turn into a good vintage, man.
I think, I'm just going to grow this thing organically. I'm probably going to have to get a regular job. So once the unemployment runs out, or, if I get a job before it runs out, that might be nice too. But I appreciated this time to, build my world. And it's been really fun. And and I've really loved the Women in Business series, particularly because it's just been so passion driven. Like every one of the women that I've interviewed have gone in and done what they've done because they truly love it at one level. At another level, it was because the market had not provided something that they desired in their life, and what they did find wasn't satisfactory, so they created their own product. And it's just on and on and on. But typically the underlying thing is passionate and willing to jump in and do something new, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's I love that we have women out there that aren't afraid to go for it. Mm-hmm. It's they say that we're still about 200 years, women, that we're still about 200 years away from being equal to men. And which is wild to think about. Like, how could that be? 200 years? No way. But
all structures are handed down just like land is handed down.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just think we have come a really long way. We were just talking about, my stepson and I were talking about how women couldn't wear pants.
Yeah.
He was like, what? I'm like, yeah, they couldn't wear pants to school. They
Yep.
had to wear dresses and skirts. And he just thought that was like the craziest thing. And I'm thinking, that was my mom.
That was my mom
My
too.
mom was one of them. Like, so it was not that long ago. And it's incredible what's happened since then, but I just can't wait for it to really get level,
It'll happen over time.
Yeah.
I was raised by a single mom and, served under Sergeant Major in the Marines who was a woman. And
That's awesome.
I've just and I've had lots of women managers and some great and some horrible. But I don't know. I've received good management from both sides.
Yeah.
And I've met inspiring people on both sides. However, I do have to say that the women in business has been a little more inspiring than the men in business stories that I've heard in the past. There's a difference, I think, in the world that you have to navigate as a woman to actually build a business. And you built a business within a business, basically.
I got lucky in that respect. Yeah, there are a lot of women out there that didn't have that.
Start fresh.
That did it themselves. I know you interviewed what is her name? She's fresh to you.
Oh God! Now
Leslie? No.
No.
I know. I'm blanking on her name. I hate it. Let me look it up. I can find it here. She's so fantastic. I don't know her personally, but I know people who know her, and she's just such a cool gal. I'm looking at your website right here to see if I can find her name. Here in just a second, I'm gonna find it. But like people like her.
Evan Remington.
What's that?
Evan?
I think so. I think that's her name. Yeah.
Yeah, no, she's fascinating, and that was a really fun interview with her. Yeah. And the amount of service that she does for the community is and just creating menus that are healthier for society because she's passionate about making it better. And even though you're thwarted at certain levels of trying to make the full dream of fresh and local foods happen, you still try. And that was just it's a good story.
Yeah, you've got some really good people on your. I've been kind of listening to your stuff. You do a really good job, Gary. You make people feel very comfortable, and I like your interviewing style a lot.
Oh, well, thank you. I like that because that's really the most important thing is to have a good dialogue. And I noticed that all of the big like radio people like Howard Stern and even Oprah, they all started out doing fantastical to grab audience. That's not my play. I'm not going to do that. But they both have got to this place where we are now, where they actually started having deeper and stronger dialogues with their people, with their guests. And I'm just going to start out that way.
Yeah, why not? Why not go big all the way? Go to the top.
That's what we're going to do.
That's right.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for coming out today. I will be sharing this link with you soon. That's probably tomorrow morning.
Okay.
That will be for the audio. I probably won't post the video for a little bit. I'm trying to rework my intro piece to tag onto all my videos. So I've got a few backed up. And I haven't finished that process yet. And I haven't woke up with the dream of what I wanted to do with that yet. And
hey, I hope it comes to you.
That's how it happens. Either a dream or I start playing around with something and then it happens, Can you do that? Can you do a Rubik's Cube?
I can. Yeah. It's funny. You had mentioned something about, is there anything that you had always wished that you had learned and then did it, you didn't. And I said, well, I had always wanted to learn the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
And I was diagnosed with adult ADHD.
Oh, I have that.
Right. Yeah. So
anybody medical, but literally everybody who knows me.
Well, I actually did get diagnosed medically because I started after I got married. My husband, he's just the most kind-hearted and patient person. Thank God, because I would absolutely need that. Started recognizing some things that I had a, difficult time maybe paying attention or, things like that.
Right.
Things I already knew about myself, but then like he said it in such a kind way that I didn't take any offense to it. So I went and I talked to my doctor, and sure enough, I have ADHD. So I've been medicated, which is wild. I've never taken medication in my life for anything, except for common cold. I mean, I've never had to take medication. So I started taking it, and it has given me tremendous focus.
Yeah.
That I did not have before. And so I decided to learn how to do the Rubik's Cube. And it's actually so much fun. And I am learning how to do it. Literally, as I speak to you, I just started maybe 5-6 days ago, and I can solve the Rubik's Cube in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
But I'm trying to get my times down to 1 minute. So I've got to learn algorithms. So like I've got these algorithms I have to learn how to do this, but I'm gonna get it. I'm determined, and it's fun. It's a good way to just kind of spend my time.
You ask it, what do they prescribe?
It's called atomoxetine. ATOM, like an atom. Atomoxetine, and I'm just taking a low dosage at like 60 milligrams. And I had to play with the dosages. At first, it was way too strong, and not that I couldn't focus. I was going too fast, like too much or some overload. I don't know. But then I changed it up, and now it's just working great. And
I'd give the world for the ability to focus, over a consistent long period of time. I sit down to write, and and then that's a habit I'm trying to build for myself, is writing on this. And literally my monkey brain's like, hey, get up, and I'm like, well, what do you want to do, monkey brain? He's like, I don't know, just not this, okay?
Just not this, yeah. Well, it's never too late. I'm not necessarily saying you need it or don't need it, but I can tell you it made a huge difference inside of my life, and I am really grateful that I did it. So now I'm just solving the white inside of this Rubik's Cube for you. So now I've got the bottom done.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I'll get my sides done in just a minute. And within a matter of no time, I'll have the yellow top done. And the number one key is, Gary, you start with the daisy.
Start with the
daisy. Yep. And then you do the yellow cross, and then you do the yellow face. And then before you know it, it's done.
Wow.
Yeah. And you could learn to do it too, Gary.
Practice with those for hours.
It's a lot of fun.
You got to do that. So the sequences get really challenging when you have ADD.
Yes. If I had ADHD, I don't know that I would be able to do this.
Yeah.
But without it, I got it. Yeah, I'm getting it. It's getting closer.
I've been thinking about this for years, actually going and getting on medicine. But I've heard like Adderall is like really intense, and I don't know that I want anything like that.
Me neither. I said the same thing to my doctor. I'm like, I don't want anything that's going to make me feel like I am on drugs.
Yeah. And
this does not make me feel like I'm on drugs.
Well, that's good.
So, if you get a chance, talk to your doctor if you want this type of a thing. Yeah. That it really did work for me.
I think it's probably the one thing that's held me back most of my life is not able to focus as deeply as I need to. Yeah.
Me too. I told my doctor, I'm like, look, I don't want to be on drugs because I want to be high or have, I just want to I want to be better at my job, and I want to be a better partner for my husband.
Right. I want to make a plan and then follow through with it.
Yes.
I don't want to rebel against myself because I don't want to,
Yes. It will change you.
Yeah.
So, think about it. For you, you might be really glad you did. Look, see, I'm getting it.
Oh my gosh, we're almost there.
It's almost like you're going to stay on the line with me just to see if I can do this.
I am, except teacher's calling, and I'm going to have to check out.
Yes. Well, what an absolute pleasure to talk with you, Gary. Let me know if you need anything, any follow-up, or if you want to redo this or anything you want. I'm here for you.
Yeah, so I will send you the link, and if you can share that with your social media, that'd be great. If you know of anybody else that you'd like to maybe talk to and see if they would like to be involved with the show, and it doesn't have to be within the Women in Business series. It can be with, I will interview anybody from any area, walk of life, and I just want to know their stories.
I've got some people for you. I'll send someone your way, Gary.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, see, I got the bottom half done.
Oh, look at you. You're getting. Hey, y'all. Garland Pepper. Those of you who have supported, bless you. Thank you so much. You can support by going to wherever you're listening to it on, marking the support button. It is like I think it's like a monthly thing where you can do $1 to $20 or something like that a month. And so if you want to support Garland Pepper that way, that can help me get to the next level to where I actually have enough shows that the advertisers are interested. So this is just my first leg, is the sponsor or support leg, and then sponsorships will come later once I get my volume up.
That's awesome. I love the name of the show too, Garland Pepper. It's too good. I love it.
And you know what? There's a lot of Gary Foxes in the world, so you could just get lost in some car sales lot in Indiana. That guy. Garland Pepper. There's me, and apparently the guy on the pets, the show about the dogs.
Best in Show.
Apparently that guy's name was Garland Pepper, and I had no idea.
It's actually Harlan.
Oh, it's Harlan. Okay.
Harlan Pepper, and he's got an obsession with nuts, and he's got a hound doggy. You got to watch it. It's called Best in Show. It's a funny Canadian comedy.
Yeah, I love those shows. Spinal Tap's definitely one of the number one.
You got to see the show. I'm telling you, you'll love his character. I love it.
Well, thank you, Wendy. Bless you, bless your family, and you all. Everybody get better and take care of your others. Love is the answer.
It's true. Thanks, Gary. See ya.